which is important. Welcome, Senator Klobuchar. You're up next.
Thank you very much, Senator Padilla. Thank you, all of you, to talk about that. You're here to talk about our progress after 5 years. I was honored to be here and support the First Step Act and work on some of the provisions. So this is a really big deal. And I want to start with you, Mr. Smith. I was a former member of the District Attorneys Association, as you know, and I also know that support of prosecutors across the country, not every single one of them, but your association was really important in getting this done. And talk about why that was as prosecutors. I think that kind of jars people sometimes, but one of the things I would always argue is, we're not like a business in every way in a prosecutor's office in that we don't want to see repeat customers. We want people to be able to go on with their lives like Mr. Charles has done. And could you just talk about the importance of the reduction of recidivism?
Senator, I referenced before about crime fighting, and I think that the general public sometimes thinks these measures are soft on crime, and they're not. This is just a different form of crime fighting. Crime prevention is just as important to protecting the public as taking the person who committed the crime off the street. And so we were in support of the First Step Act because it was common sense, it was practical stuff that targeted low-risk offenders through proven data points, and the numbers bear out. You guys did a great job. I mean, look at the recidivism rate, 46%. I mean, that's incredible. There's no one that can argue with those numbers.
Right. So you've got the Justice Department numbers that nearly 30,000 who were released under the First Step Act, only 12% recidivated compared to the overall Bureau of Prison recidivism rate, which is more than 46%. That's correct, right?
Yep, correct. So once again, we as prosecutors take our oath to protect the public very seriously. But I think sometimes we just get a bad rap. I mean, it seems like half of the people think we're too tough on people, we're putting everybody in crime. Then you got the other half of the people that are saying, oh, you're too soft. You're letting people out too early. But I thought we thought at NDAA the First Step Act struck a great balance, and it proved out with the data.
Yeah, Mr. Charles, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience. For years, Senator Cornyn and I led the One Stop Shop Community Reentry Program Act to help former inmates reintegrate into their communities by creating resource centers that help them find jobs, housing, mental health services, substance abuse treatment. For years before I was a DA, I actually was involved in a volunteer program called Amicus and visited a woman at the women's prison for nearly 10 years. And I just saw this need when you're there every single month and get to know someone for what the plan is when they get out. So could you talk about, as someone who works to get inmates ready to reintegrate into their communities, can you talk about the importance of ensuring that people continue to have access to recidivism reduction programs when they're released from custody?
Thank you, Senator. And I also want to thank you for your work in reentry. Having reentry resources available once some person is released is vital to them being successful. I myself ran into hurdles when I was released. I couldn't find housing. And because I couldn't find housing, my stability was weakened. But thankfully, I had a friend who allowed me to stay with them for about 4 months until I was able to get my footing. So being able to have these reentry resources available for those that are returning to society allows them to have the support so that they can be productive, so that they can go on and be successful in their lives and in the lives of their family members. So without those things, including the programs that are now placed in the prison because of the First Step Act, allows those people to be able to learn vocational educational skills and trades so that once they are released, they will be able to find employment. So those hurdles that most people run into once they're released from incarceration is housing, is employment, is transportation. So if the resources are available or organizations that are available that provide those things, that person is less likely to recidivate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Last question, Mr. Markle. You served special education teacher for the Bureau of Prisons. Thank you for that for over 20 years. And talk about, I know there's some wait lists as we look at these numbers, which I just discussed with Mr. Smith, that are so positive, but talk about how wait lists to access First Step Act educational programs could negatively impact the goals of the Act and what Congress can do to improve the implementation. I know you talked a little bit about these programs with Senator Booker, but if you could talk about specifically wait lists.
Thank you, Senator. With the implementation of the First Step Act, obviously education and programming and everything that we do became very popular. So obviously inmates wanted to be involved in programs that sometimes had been forgotten. We've always done GED and special education, but it's now emphasized by the First Step Act. So we can fill what we can fill with the amount of teachers that we have, the amount of staff and resources we have. We fill the classes up. When we're able to be in the actual classrooms teaching and not being pulled to different assignments, we do our best to move through those. So inmates are on waiting lists. Some additions were made to where they are receiving credit for being on wait lists, but that's a problem too because an inmate is not receiving the actual programming or the benefits from the First Step Act, but they're still earning the credits. So the biggest problem is just we need the resources and the staff to continue to push forward to eliminate the wait list and actually get people into classrooms so they can receive the benefits from the First Step Act.
Thank you, and thank you as well, Mr. Smith, for your work. I have to head out, but I'll send you a question in writing. I'm sure it'll be very exciting. So, Thank you.
Thank you. And